Adab and Adab are our identity of a society, and we as Pakistanis boast of a rich literary heritage, which even to this day has a strong international literary presence in the world. On this note, I would like to bring to the fore the two people who are responsible for bringing the Adab Festival to us, Mrs. Ameena Saiyid and Mr. Asif Farrukhi. A big round of applause for both of them. The Adab Festival is the brainchild of Mrs. Ameena Saiyid, and she is responsible for bringing the concept of the literary festival to Pakistan. Ameena Saiyid has been a publisher for 30 years. She is the founder and director of the Adab Festival Pakistan. She was awarded Order of the British Empire by the British Queen in 2005 and the Knight of Arts and Literature by the Government of France in 2013. She has also been awarded the Sitara-e-Imtiaz by the President of Pakistan in 2018. Ameena is on the board of Habib University Foundation, Institute of Business Management, Karachi, and Institute of Art and Culture, Lahore. It is my honor and privilege to welcome her to the stand. Please, a heartwarming response for the woman behind Adab Festival.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Honorable Governor of Sindh, Mr. Imran Ismail, Mr. Khalid Mahmood of Getz Pharma, my colleague and my co-founder and director of Adab Festival, Dr. Asif Farrukhi, Dr. Ishrat Husain, Dr. Arfa, Sayeda, Zehra, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome you to the first Adab Festival, Pakistan. We call it the Adab Fest because we want every part of the nation to be involved in this. We want to celebrate all that has already been achieved and also to encourage and boost creativity in all its luminous forms. From the bards of Balochistan to the storytellers of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, the modern-day writers of Islamabad, Lahore, and Karachi, from the rich traditions of Punjab and Sindh, and the unopened treasure chests of Gilgit-Balochistan, we hope to coax more and more manifestations of talent in culture and research. Indeed, we would like to create a new Silk Road, a new Silk Route through which all the grandeur of our traditions and culture, literature and the arts, expressed through every language of this country, can travel out of obscurity and insecurity to join the world's assemblage of cultures and their luscious fruit. Too long have sections of our population been isolated due to various prejudices. We want to end such bigotry and narrow-mindedness. We wish to be inclusive, and we hope that trend of inclusivity will catch on. We hope that our Adab Fest will become a movement that will spread across the country. I would like to thank our wonderful sponsors, without whom this event would not have happened. It is because of their generosity and vision that enabled us not only to hold this festival, but to make it free for everyone and to make it inclusive and accessible. A big thank you and a deep gratitude to Mr. Khalid Mahmood, who is with us on the stage today. Mr. Khalid Mahmood is the Managing Director of Getz Pharma, who is our lead sponsor and who has helped and supported us not only financially, but in countless other critically important ways. Thank you, Khalid Saab. Adab Festival would not have happened without his vision and his support. He is a true patron of literature, the arts, and culture. I'm deeply grateful to the Honorable Governor of Sindh for his generous offer of holding the Adab Festival in this historic and splendid Governor's House. Thank you, sir, for your kind service to literature and to culture, and to inviting all the people of Karachi to come into the Governor's House and enjoy its splendid lawns. Many of them have never been inside the Governor's House, and it is because of the generosity of Governor Sahab that they will be able to come here over the weekend. As you know, this is a historic mansion. The Qaid-e-Azam took his oath of office for the office of Governor General in this building, and he lived and died here. And on an earlier visit, I had actually seen the bedroom where he lived. So we are in a truly historic mansion. I'd like to thank our other sponsors, including Thar Foundation, Pioneer Cement, Halib Milk, Lums, Dr. Farhan Isa of Isa Laboratories and Diagnostic Center, Kareem, Dalda, Goethe Institute, Tapal Tea, Pioneer Book House, Pie in the Sky, Phenomena by Pomme, Barbecue Tonight, Arts Council of Pakistan, I Am Karachi, Vasal Arts Association, Shama's Cakes, Splash, Hapko, Faisal Malik of Thespians Theatre, and a very special thank to Dawn and the Jung Group, Mr. Hamid Haroon, Nilofar Patel, Mr. Sarmad Ali, Ms. Fatma Zakir, and the Ibrat Group of newspapers and Mr. Qazi Asad Abid. Thank you for your wonderful support. A big thank you to our young volunteers who are here and will be helping you over the weekend. And I hope that when they are, I hope that when they are older and out of university, I hope that they will also organize literature festivals. And while they are students, I hope they will organize them in their own schools and colleges. A very big thank you to Habib Metro Bank, who have been big supporters of us. And I would like to thank our wonderful Adab Festival Pakistan team, who have worked literally night and day to bring this to you. Shama Askari, Shema Sayyid, Nadya Ghani, Sadia Mirza, who are all here today. And I would like to thank all our volunteers who are looking after each of these halls. And these small groups of volunteers believed passionately in the Adab Festival vision. And they actually, just 4 of them, did the work of an entire institution, and quite brilliantly. I would also like to thank many of our international authors who are here with us today. Fatme Aman, who is here from the US. Thank you for joining us today, coming all the way from there. And we have 2 special guests from India who are with us here today, Dr. Saif Mahmood and Saira Shah Halim. Thank you for joining us. And thank you for being with us today. Assalamu alaikum.
I would like to call Mr. Asif Farrukhi. Asif Farrukhi is a fiction writer, critic, and translator. He was educated at the Dow Medical College, Karachi, and Harvard University, US. He published several collections of short stories and essays, as well as translations of prose and poetry from contemporary writers. He is the founder of Adab Festival Pakistan. He is an associate professor at Habib University, Karachi, and director of the Arzu Center for Regional Languages and Humanities. Please, a warm welcome for Mr. Asif Farrukhi.
Thank you. Honorable Governor, respectable Dr. Ishrat Husain, Dr. Arfa Sayeda Zehra, Mr. Khalid Mahmood, Stefan Winkler, and of course, Ameena Saiyid. Ladies and gentlemen, Khawateen o Hazrat, Assalamu alaikum. It's a great honor to welcome you in these beautiful and historical surroundings at the onset of what already promises to be an amazing program, intellectually challenging and exciting. The event today is an important milestone as it marks a decade of literary festivals in Pakistan. Ameena Saiyid and I took a gamble 10 years ago, and we thought that it would be a kind of a pleasant pastime. A few people will turn up and we will make a decent kind of noise. There was no looking back as festivals took on a life of their own and soon began to be replicated from Lahore and Islamabad to Gwadar, Faisalabad and Jhelum. Other cities and regions have been clamoring for more or for their turn. This by itself is a major success as it indicates and abiding interest in all things related to books and writing. With this success behind us, we wanted to take things to scale. We are proud of Pakistan's literary and cultural heritage and the diversity it represents, but we are also acutely aware of the challenges, attempts to stifle and undermine this diversity and the differences in points of view. This can also lead to a kind of, should I call it, stereotyping on the international scene, and worse still, we begin to internalize these stereotypes, especially the younger people who should be the real harbingers of change, but we tend to pass on nothing but our cynicism to them. We initiated this Adab festival with the purpose to celebrate literature in Pakistan's many languages, talk about books, appreciate cultural variety through dance, music, and film, pay homage to the stalwarts, and recognize emerging voices. Easier said than done. This inauguration ceremony also marks the culmination of a long process of tribulations and challenges. We had to start from the scratch, a small team with everybody wearing many hats. We had to deal with a lawsuit, but Ameena and I took on to discussing the program details over cups of tea in the cafeteria of the Sindh High Court. I had only seen the court in Bollywood movies, but I later on realized when I was looking at the judges and lawyers that this was an invaluable experience by itself. We were determined to make the best of this opportunity and not to be hectored or pressurized. To cut a long story short, we persisted, we survived. It was the pleasure of dealing with books and working with authors and poets which kept this spirit alive. The generosity of friends and well-wishers kept us going. I would particularly like to cite the support of Khalid Mahmood Saab and other friends. Throughout this turbulent period, there was a laughing, a lovely voice which kept urging me on and whispering, "Tum akele nahi ho." I'm still unable to speak of Fehmida Riaz in the past tense, and for me, she remains a guiding spirit. I would be playing a recording of the last poem of hers, but I would like to read from the last poem she wrote in मैं नहीं अकेली दुनिया में, ये कायनात और ये तारे, चांद और सूरज के नज़ारे, ये मोटर कार की आवाज़ें, अनजाने पंछी की परवाज़ें, एक ही गौहर से ये बने, जो मेरा भी है तेरा भी, जो उसका भी है इसका भी, मैं नहीं अकेली दुनिया में। फ़हमीदा रियाज़, आपकी मौजूदगी और आपकी रहनुमाई का शुक्रिया। फ़हमीदा रियाज़ का कलाम ज़िंदा है और आज इस ऐलान के साथ हमारा जश्न शुरू हो सकता है।
Thank you, Mr. Asif Farrukhi. We would like to invite the Governor of Sindh, Mr. Imran Ismail, to please join us and say a few words. Thank you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you so much, Mrs. Ameena Saiyid, Mr. Asif Farrukhi, Mr. Khalid Mahmood Sahab, Dr. Sayyid Wali Nasr, Arfa Sayeda Zehra, और हमारे फेडरल मिनिस्टर डॉक्टर इशरत हुसैन साहब, अस्सलाम वालेकुम, and ladies and gentlemen, of course, अस्सलाम वालेकुम. I welcome you to the Governor House, and this is not my vision या मेरा कोई बड़ा दिल नहीं है आप लोगों को यहाँ पे accommodate करने का. This is the vision of the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan. He promised to open the Governor Houses for public use, for cultural events, for the art that is dying in Pakistan. जितनी support उसको कर सकें उनकी ख्वाहिश थी. He takes fortnightly report of the activities being held in Governor House. And I am proud to say कि सबसे ज़्यादा public activities हमारे Governor House सिंध में हुई. मैं बहुत बड़ा मद्दा हूँ अदब फेस्टिवल का. मैं हर साल इसको अटेंड करने की कोशिश करता हूँ. लास्ट ईयर बीच लग्जरी होटल में मैंने अटेंड भी किया था और इसी तरह का एक स्टेज था. आई केम लेट تو میں نے پیچھے سب سے پیچھے کھڑے ہو کے میں نے انور مقصود صاحب واز گیونگ اے ٹاک، وہ میں نے ان کی سنی تھی، اٹ واز سو انسپائرنگ کہ گورنر بننے کے بعد میں نے پھر انور مقصود صاحب کو کال کی اور میں نے انہیں کہا کہ جی آئی ووڈ لائک یو ٹو ہولڈ سملر ایونٹس ان گورنر ہاؤس جب بھی آپ چاہیں. دس از اوپن فار پیپل لائک یو. جب بھی آپ ادبی کوئی گفتگو کرنا چاہیں، کوئی لوگوں کو بلانا چاہیں، کوئی بک لانچ ہو، اینی تھنگ، پلیز یوز مائی گورنر ہاؤس فار اٹ اینڈ اٹ ول بی این آنر فار می کہ گورنر ہاؤس شوڈ بی یوز فار دیز کائنڈ آف ایونٹس. ہم نے کوشش کی ہے کہ اپنے ایکسپینسز کو ریڈیوس کریں. لیٹس ویٹ فار دا اذان. سو آئی واز سیئنگ کہ ہم نے کوشش کی ہے کہ اپنے گورنمنٹ کے جو ایکسپینڈیچر ہے اس کو ریڈیوس کریں اور جو ہمارے منسٹرز کا، گورنرز کا، اس کو ہم ایک آسٹیرٹی ڈرائیو کے ذریعے ریڈیوس کرنے کی کوشش کر رہے ہیں. اس آسٹیرٹی ڈرائیو میں ہم نے جو لیوش لنچز یا ڈنرز یا بڑی دعوتیں یا چیزیں تھیں ان کو بند کیا ہے. اور اگر آپ میں سے لوگوں کا اتفاق ہوا ہو گورنر ہاؤس آنے کا تو چائے اور بسکٹ پہ ہم نے استفادہ کرنے کی کوشش کی ہے اور اتنے بسکٹ کھائے ہیں کہ قبض بھی ہو گئی ہے اس سے کچھ نہ کچھ. آئی اسٹارٹڈ ہیٹنگ بسکٹس ناؤ. اب کراچی ہب تھا ادب کا تھا. میں اس لیے آپ سے کہہ رہا ہوں کہ کافی عرصے سے ہم نے کوئی نام ایسا سنا نہیں جو کراچی نے نیا پروڈیوس کیا ہو ادب میں. کوئی نیا شاعر، کوئی نیا آرٹسٹ، کوئی نیا گلجی. آئی ڈونٹ نو، میں نے سنا نہیں، یا میں بہت دور رہ گیا ہوں. ایک زمانہ تھا جب کراچی واز پروڈیوسنگ ون آفٹر انادر اور اتنے زبردست کراچی کو دیکھتے تھے لوگ کہ یہاں پہ ادب سے، فن سے تعلق رکھنے والے، چاہے وہ غزل سنگرز ہوں، قوالی ہو، وہ کوئی آرٹسٹ ہو، پینٹر ہو، وہ کراچی نے ایک حد تک پروڈیوس کرنے کے بعد بند کر دیا. اور پھر کراچی وینٹ ٹو اے ڈارک ایرا. I would say after 75, 80 تک تو پھر بھی we were fine. اس کے بعد we went into a dark era. اور instead of producing artists, poets, I don't know, جتنے بھی ہم نے ادب سے تعلق رکھنے والے مصنف، تھنکرز، ہم نے پھر دوسری ایک نسل پروڈیوس کرنا شروع کر دی. عجیب عجیب نام ہمیں سننے کو ملنے لگے، اسلم لنگڑا، سلیم اسکرو ڈرائیور، فلانا. اور یہ وہ نسل تھی جو ایک بہت بڑا اثاثہ تھی ہماری کراچی کا، ہمارے ملک کا اثاثہ تھی، جس کو خراب کرنے میں، برباد کرنے میں سمجھتا ہوں کہ ہم برابر کے شریک ہیں. ہم سب کی میں بات کر رہا ہوں، جو ڈائریکٹلی اس سے تعلق رکھتے تھے، وہ جو انڈائریکٹ تعلق رکھتے تھے، جنہوں نے آواز نہیں اٹھائی، اور جو کہہ گئے کہ ہمارا تو کوئی تعلق واسطہ نہیں ہے، میں تو اپنے بچوں کو لے کے ملک سے باہر جا رہا ہوں. सब इक्वल पार्टनर्स। अल्लाह का करम हुआ कि उसके बाद हमारी लॉ इन्फोर्समेंट एजेंसीज़ की मदद से अल्लाह की रज़ा से कराची की खुशियाँ और कराची की लाइफ वापस लौटी है। फॉर अ डिकेड और मोर देन अ डिकेड कराची हैज़ नॉट सीन फंक्शंस लाइक दीज और अदर फंक्शंस जो अब कराची में होते हैं। हेरिटेज कार रैली हुई, कोई हार्ले डेविडसन बाइक रैली हुई, मैराथन हुई, ये डिफरेंट चीज़ें कराची बिल्कुल भूल गया था। हमने अपने यूथ में देखा, उसके बाद नहीं देखा। तो अब ये लाइफ इज़ बैक टू कराची। आई होप कि आपकी तरह के ये अदबी फेस्टिवल और इवेंट्स will help them help Karachi produce more of artists, poets, thinkers, philosophers, writers जो आगे यहाँ से लेके चलेंगे हमारी नस्लों को। वो लोग इसके अंदर अब आएंगे दोबारा इंशाल्लाह। मैं आपके अदबी फेस्टिवल का मद्दा तो हूँ ही, लेकिन आज मुझे खुशी इसकी इसलिए ज़्यादा है कि आज ये हमारे इस गवर्नर हाउस में मुनक्किद हो रही है। और मेरा आपसे ये इंशाल्लाह वादा है कि जब तक मैं गवर्नर हाउस में हूँ, आपका ये अदबी फेस्टिवल हर साल इसी तरह इस गवर्नर हाउस में मुनक्किद करेंगे। हम इसको इससे भी बड़ा इवेंट बना सकते हैं। वी कैन टेक इट इंटरनेशनल। और मेरी ख्वाहिश है कि आपसे ये दरख्वास्त करूँ कि आप इसको, जो अदब फेस्टिवल है हमारा, इसको टेक इट बियॉन्ड द बाउंड्रीज़। इसको इंडिया ले जाएं, इसको बांग्लादेश ले जाएं, इसको श्रीलंका ले जाएं, चाइना ले जाएं। टेक इट इंटरनेशनल। देयर आर मैनी पीपल लुकिंग टुवर्ड्स अस। वी आर अ राइजिंग नेशन। दिस इज़ अ पाकिस्तान दैट वाज प्रॉमिस्ड बाय कायद-ए-आज़म मोहम्मद अली जिन्ना। A real dynamic and pulsating Pakistan is emerging now. सिर्फ हमें इसके ऊपर यकीन करने की ज़रूरत है कि ये हमारा पाकिस्तान, जो नया पाकिस्तान जिसका वादा किया है, वो ये इब्तिदा है उस नए पाकिस्तान की। इसके अंदर बड़ा दुख, दर्द, खून और सारा जिद्दोजहद इसके अंदर शामिल है। ये आपकी मदद से आज अल्लाह ने पाकिस्तान को वो दिन दिखाया है कि पाकिस्तान में एक दयानतदार क़यादत आपके सामने है। और मुझे ये कहने में कोई आर नहीं है कि कायद-ए-आज़म मोहम्मद अली जिन्ना के बाद अगर कोई शख्स ट्रू लीडर पाकिस्तान को मिला है तो वो इमरान खान की सूरत में मिला है। ही इज़ गॉट अ विजन, ही इज़ गॉट अ प्रोग्राम, ही इज़ गॉट द पॉलिटिकल विल टू डू इट। जो लेकिन अगर हम किसी को भी कंपेयर करें किसी से, तो बहुत ज़्यादा फ़र्क नहीं नज़र आता बातों में। हमसे आज तक किसी ने ये नहीं कहा कि मैं पैसा आऊँगा इक़्तिदार में तो पैसा लूट के लंदन ले जाऊँगा। हमसे आज तक किसी ने नहीं कहा कि मैं इक़्तिदार में आऊँगा तो बोरी में लाशें डालूँगा। सब ने अच्छी अच्छी बातें की, एजुकेशन है, हेल्थ है, फलाना है, सब अपने अपने प्रोग्राम्स देते हैं। बट इनकी पॉलिटिकल विल आपको नहीं दिखी कभी। नाउ यू कैन सी द पॉलिटिकल विल एक्चुअली देयर। Actually, you can see the Prime Minister working more than 12 hours a day in his office. You can see him running around for the country. बड़ा आसान काम था IMF से कर्जा लेने के लिए। डॉक्टर साहब बैठे हैं, he has all the experience in the world to deal with IMF and World Bank. We have a team who can really negotiate a good deal. लेकिन हम avoid कर रहे हैं। हम कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि अपने ज़राए से, अपने दोस्तों से, पड़ोसी ममालिक से, कहीं से हम चला लें मामला, लेकिन हम उस तरफ ना जाएं जहाँ से मुल्क को कोई और डिक्टेट करे। दिस इज़ फॉर द कंट्री। हमारे लिए तो बहुत आसान काम था। आते साथ ही IMF से साइन करते, पैसा आ जाता, लोगों को दिखाते, स्टॉक भी ऊपर चला गया। हालांकि स्टॉक एक्सचेंज इज़ नो इंडिकेटर ऑफ इकानमी, बट दैट्स हाउ पीपल परसीव कि जी पैसा है, स्टॉक देखो कहाँ पहुँच गया इमरान खान के आते ही, चलो इसका मतलब है मुल्क अब सही डगर पर लग गया। इट्स ऑल परसेप्शन। बाहर की दुनिया में जो पाकिस्तान का परसेप्शन पेंट किया गया है, पाकिस्तान इज़ उससे बरक्स है। आज पाकिस्तान में कोई टेररिज्म नहीं है, पाकिस्तान में बेहतरीन इन्वेस्टमेंट अपॉर्चुनिटी है, पाकिस्तान में बेहतरीन टैलेंट मौजूद है। पाकिस्तान इज़ अ ग्रोइंग कंट्री। जो ग्रोइंग मुल्क होता है उसके अंदर पैसा लगाने से आपका ज़्यादा पैसा आप बना सकते हैं उस मुल्क के अंदर, बनिस्बत उस मुल्क के जो ग्रो कर चुका होता है वहाँ जाके आपका पैसा नहीं बन सकता। सो हमारे सब के दोस्त रिश्तेदार बाहर हैं पाकिस्तान से, और वो हमेशा हमें कहते हैं कि जी हमें अपने वतन से प्यार है और हम कुछ करना चाहते हैं वतन के लिए। इफ़ दे वांट टू डू समथिंग फॉर द कंट्री, this is the right time. They should come and invest in Pakistan now. Tell them to come and invest in Pakistan. Tell them this is the best investment environment you can ever get in Pakistan. I'm sorry, मैं topic से थोड़ा सा हट गया जी. Coming back to the other festival, because this is on our head कि पाकिस्तान में पैसा आना चाहिए किसी सूरत, और अपनों का पैसा आना चाहिए। तो मैं फिर से आपको कॉन्ग्रेचुलेट करता हूँ अदब फेस्टिवल को. आई विश आई वॉज हेयर. मुझे अभी जाना पड़ रहा है यहाँ से, स्ट्रेट में निकलूँगा, प्राइम मिनिस्टर ने बुलाया हुआ है. आई वॉन्ट बी हेयर फॉर नेक्स्ट 2 days. आई विल मिस इट, बट माई वाइफ एंड माई फैमिली will definitely attend. My wife is a very good speaker, by the way. You should hear her someday. So, thank you so much. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much to the Governor of Sindh, Mr. Imran Ismail, for opening the doors of the Governor House for us for the Adab Festival. A big round of applause, please, for the Governor of Sindh, Mr. Imran Ismail. When events like this happen, they cannot happen without the patronage of a sponsor. And I would like to acknowledge Mr. Khalid Mahmood, the Managing Director and CEO of Getz Pharma, for supporting the Adab Festival. He is currently engaged with various civic, cultural and educational organizations and has served on its board for the last 6 years. He is the president of the Worldwide Fund of Nature, WWF Pakistan, and has served on its board for 6 years. Khalid Mahmood is currently on the board of the Zindagi Trust, which is a world-renowned trust that manages 2 of the best-run and highly rated schools for 3,500 girls from underprivileged backgrounds. He is the chairman of the Board of Trustees of the award-winning civil and cultural organization Peace Niche T2F and is also on the board of the Iqbal Ahmed Center of Education. He has committed personal, human and financial resources to campaigns and programs related to sports, education, healthcare, cultural and environmental preservation. Mr. Khalid Mahmood has an MBA in marketing from Rutgers Schools of Management, Rutgers University, and obtained his bachelor degree in industrial engineering from California State University, Pomona in the US. A warm welcome to our sponsor, Mr. Khalid Mahmood.
Honorable Governor Sindh, Mr. Imran Ismail, Dr. Vali Nasr, Arfa Sayeda Zehra Sahiba, Dr. Ishrat Husain, Ameena Saiyid Sahiba, Asif Farrukhi Sahab, the organizers, Mr. Stefan Winkler, the organizers and volunteers of the Adab Festival, and respected guests. A very good evening to you all. It is a pleasure being here for the first annual Adab Festival, Pakistan. Over the years, several of my friends and colleagues, especially from the industry, have asked me why Getz Pharma, a pharmaceutical company, supports literature, music and dance, theater, film, and art, instead of just donating towards healthcare, education, and education for the underprivileged. Getz Pharma, of course, donates to both these causes, but the reason to support the literature and dance, art and theater is simple. We believe that a healthy citizen is not only a person who has a healthy body, but also has a healthy soul, and citizens with healthy souls enable a peaceful, developed, and a progressive nation. Peace and progress can only flourish in a nation if its people have the space and freedom to debate, discuss, and agree to disagree with each other in a peaceful manner in public forums such as these. Despite this, most corporations in Pakistan restrict the donations to education and health, and very few donate towards literature, theater, and the arts. And we do know that the state provides a minuscule support and funding to the fine arts in Pakistan. So when a few months ago, Ameena Sahiba and Asif Farrukhi Sahab met with me to discuss the idea of a new literature festival, I immediately agreed to help them in making their idea into a reality. We are not only the lead sponsor, but our organization has also invested time and energy in helping the organizers put this event together, and are glad to do so, as this is a part of our commitment to the society and follows the company's ethos of building a tolerant, well-informed, and intellectually vibrant Pakistan. Getz Pharma is also sponsoring the Fiction Prize, which celebrates novelists of Pakistani origin whose books have made an important contribution to the world of literature. The winner of this prize will be announced this evening. Some of the previous winners and the current contenders are one of the most celebrated writers in our country and in the region. Getz Pharma is also hosting and sponsoring for the 6th consecutive year Iqbal Ahmed Center for Public Education Documentary and Short Film Awards that recognize the work of young Pakistani documentary and filmmakers. The theme for this year is how to create a better future for Pakistan. And dozens of budding young filmmakers, some of them really living in very, very remote areas and in even Kache Abadis, sent us entries from across the country. The ceremony for the eCape Film Festival and Film and Documentary Awards will take place tomorrow at 3:30 p.m. and we request all of you to attend it. Well, I believe and we believe that a creative and meaningful literature reflects society with all its ills, joys, and sorrows, and does not hide them. A nation that censures and or censors writers who have the passion and the courage to truthfully document society's ills, sorrows, and joys turn to violence, as we see in our country, region, and many parts of the world today, and the Honorable Minister referred to it a little while ago. Good literature cannot flourish in a society which does not tolerate and celebrate thinkers of diverse thoughts, faiths, philosophies, and ideologies. How prophetic are the words of the famous Mexican writer Carlos Fuentes, who said, quote, "Nations flourish in diversity and perish in isolation," unquote. Just like the state has an obligation to provide education and health care for the people, it is also important that it promotes and nurtures literature, music, theater, and arts. It is indeed unfortunate that this beautiful city of Karachi, with over 20 million people, has only one public auditorium where performing arts can take place. In addition, there are no schools for young children to learn creative writing, theater, acting, or music. Most countries in Asia, on the other hand, have created free spaces in every locality, rich and poor. Governor Ismail, therefore, deserves our thanks for donating the Governor House for the Adab Festival. We hope that during his tenure, the foundation of several new auditoriums in the small and big auditoriums in the public sector can be built across Karachi and in Sindh. Well, it is a wonderful feeling that this weekend the city of Karachi will be transformed from the industrial and economic hub of Pakistan into a center of culture and literature, as well as a forum for debate on the political troubles that our country and the world face. Adab Fest will host dozens of luminaries and enthrall and enlighten us with their talks and ideas, and we thank them for being here. I would like to conclude by saying that Adab Festival is a celebration of the written word. We celebrate freedom from the aggressive ignorance and factionalism that have become the hallmark of our times. We live in a cynical world where despondent events siphon off our energies, inspiration and the ability to appreciate the beauty of life. Adab Festival provides an opportunity to be inspired, a chance to fall in love with the written word, and a moment to appreciate the beauty of life. I wish you all an inspirational and enjoyable 3 days of festival of the mind, heart, and soul. Thank you.
Thank you to Mr. Khalid Mahmood, without whose patronage and support the Adab Festival would not have been possible. A big thank you and a big round of applause, please. I would like to call Mr. Stefan Winkler, the director of the Goethe Institute, Pakistan. He has been with us since June 2015. The German Cultural Institute in Karachi is serving the German-Pakistani cultural cooperation since the last 62 years. His background is Middle Eastern and literary studies, and before coming to Pakistan, he has worked in Egypt, Syria, and Germany. Stefan is a familiar face on the Karachi cultural and art scene, and he has supported many art and literary events. A warm welcome to Mr. Stefan Winkler.
Honorable Governor of Sindh, Mr. Imran Ismail, Muhtarama Ameena Sahiba, Muhtaram Asif Sahib, dear Khalid Mahmood, dear distinguished speakers, dear guests and friends, Assalamu alaikum. It is a pleasure and an honor for me to participate in the first Adab Festival, Pakistan. The Goethe Institute is a partner of literary festivals in Pakistan since their beginnings. It is our aim to bring authors and intellectuals together and to get the Pakistani audience acquainted with the German literary and intellectual production. Germany and Pakistan have a long cultural relationship, and this does not go without mentioning two intellectual giants. One, of course, is Allama Iqbal, who, as you know, has studied in Germany, in Heidelberg, the same city I have had the honor to study. And he was very much influenced by German philosophy, by Nietzsche, and also by Goethe, who is the name giver of our institute. The other giant is a lady, a scholar, Annemarie Schimmel, of course, also well known here, the translator from Urdu and Sindhi and many other languages, the expert on Sufism, who has lived in Pakistan for many, many years and was a lifelong friend of Pakistan. Now, in their footsteps, we had invited two writers, but unfortunately, one of our invited writers, Peter Panke, who many of you know, had to cancel his trip for health reasons. Peter Panke is a writer, musician, and scholar, an old friend of the cultures of the subcontinent, and especially the Sufi music in the Indus Valley. But he sends his greetings to the organizers and the audience. But I'm happy that the other writer, Stefan Winkler, is able to join. He's a writer, a public intellectual, and a translator of Arabic poetry, and the former editor of our magazine Fikrun wa Fan. He came to Pakistan several years ago, and he's very excited to join the festival from tomorrow. His talk will be on Sunday. I would like to thank the organizers, Ameena and Asif, for their tireless efforts to strengthen the literary scene and to encourage the intellectual debates in Karachi. The Swiss-German writer Hermann Hesse once said, "From all the worlds that were invented by humankind, the world of books is the greatest." In that sense, I wish the Adab Festival wholeheartedly all the success for this edition and all the further ones. Thank you. Shukriya.
Thank you, Stefan, and we look forward to many more partnerships with our German partner. I would like to invite Dr. Ishrat Husain, who is advisor to the Prime Minister of Pakistan on institutional reforms and austerity, Former Governor of State Bank of Pakistan, Dr. Husain has enjoyed a distinguished 2-decades-long career at the World Bank and as Dean and Director of the Institute of Business Administration, Karachi, IBA, among serving in several other key areas of responsibilities. Please warmly welcome Dr. Ishrat Husain.
Mrs. Ameena Saiyid, Dr. Asif Farrukhi, Mr. Khalid Mahmood, Dr. Arfa Sayyid, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me thank very profusely both Ameena and Asif for taking this initiative in organizing this first Adab Festival. I am personally been a beneficiary of their organized effort for the last 10 years. And I've been invited to every single literary festival which has held in Karachi. It's a great pleasure that they have continued this particular effort, which is very much a condition which we require to be further enlarged in the body, social, economic, cultural life of this vibrant city. And this is why I want to thank them for taking this particular initiative. And I also want to very much appreciate the efforts of the Governor Sindh for opening up the launch of the Governor House for this particular occasion, and Mr. Khalid Mahmood, who has always been a patron of art and culture, for sponsoring this. I'm personally indebted to Ameena. She encouraged me to produce 3 books under Oxford University Press, and before my 4th book, which will be launched soon, she had left that, but I'm very much personally indebted to her for the interest she took in coaching and guiding me in this particular subject of writing. I also want to join Dr. Asif Farrukhi in paying my personal tribute to a very great poetess of Pakistan, Fehmi Daryaz, whom history, I think, would always remember much better than what we and our generation has actually treated her. So I want to pay my personal tribute to a friend and a great poetess. Pakistan's discourse so far has been too much inward looking. We are so much concerned about the mundane affairs of survival, politics, economics, that we are not trying to place ourselves among the tensions, the dilemmas, and the trade-offs which are taking place at the global and the regional level, and which are going to affect Pakistan in the near future and the generation which is the youth of Pakistan. So I have taken the liberty of describing to you 5 or 6 major dilemmas and tensions which are not affecting us because we are very much an insular society, but we would be either hurt by them or we can benefit from them. The first and the foremost is that the ideological schism of the left and right has completely disappeared. It has become irrelevant, mostly after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Even China is a hybrid model of authoritarianism with capitalist market economy. And this sharp division between left and right is no longer valid. It is now being overtaken by a different type of authoritarian, populist, nationalist, xenophobic, migrant, anti-migrant, anti-gender, irrespective of class distinctions. These are the issues which are dividing the societies. The examples: Trump won in the United States because the coastal states, which are very much integrated with the rest of the world, were quite against Mr. Trump. But the hinterland, which did not benefit from the globalization, voted him to power. And we are facing that particular problem. Brexit is another manifestation of this sharp division between London and the big cities and the rural areas of the Britain, who all wanted to exit European Union. You look at Italy, where the very far nationalist parties have come to power. You look at Mr. Orban in Hungary, he is completely anti-Muslim, anti-migrant, doesn't want to have anything to do in the future of the European Union. Therefore, we have a completely different configuration, and how this is going to set, and the binary of the past, which still dominates the discourse in Pakistan, left and right, is no longer valid. My second submission is that global governance has become so complex, but the institutions which are responsible for global governance have become totally inadequate to respond and meet those challenges. The institutions like the World Bank, the IMF, who had the monopoly of power, and the United Nations, which brought everybody together, do not have as much influence today as they used to have in the past. New institutions are emerging where global hegemony is being taken to task, and very narrow parochial considerations are bringing people together. The Trans-Pacific Alliance is an example where some countries in Asia are coming together in order to perpetuate their own interest against what they consider the likely hegemony of China. And Chinese institutions are now asserting themselves. They are the largest donor of assistance to Africa, and the One Belt, One Road is going to cost trillions in 65 countries of the world. So this, I think, is something which we have to realize, that the traditional governance institutions are no longer valid. The third change which is taking place is of the technological disruption. If you look at the digital revolution, if you look at artificial intelligence, if you look at robotics, big data, data analytics, biotechnology, quantum computing, they are going to completely change the way we work, think, and operate. And if we do not try to bring ourselves up to that level of absorption and assimilation of these technologies in our society, in our educational institutions, in our day-to-day life, we will be left behind. But that requires that we emphasize new set of skills, innovation, and entrepreneurship. The parents in Pakistan should stop telling the children, go and become medical doctor, go and become an engineer, go and become a civil servant. I think you have to change your mindset. You have to send them to schools where science, technology, engineering, and mathematics are actually the staple food for further enlightenment. The fourth challenge which I foresee is that the shift of the economic balance of power between the United States, which is a decaying economy, and China and Asia, is not only going to be a trade and technology war, but it's going to have political repercussions for asserting the hegemony of the winner. It is true that China has never colonized any country in the world. So this presumption that China is extending its muscle power to win over the developing countries and colonize them is a complete myth. But this is a myth which is being perpetuated by the United States in order to regain its own position. The fifth challenge is there is exponential growth in information, and we cannot keep up to sift and make sense of information. So we are now not quite sure which piece of information is fake news, which are the real facts, and which are the fabricated facts. When you completely lose that power to interpret the information, you are going to be in great difficulty. And this is what the information explosion is going to do. And the sixth, or more distressful happening in the world, which we are not really realizing, is the climate change. Pakistan is one of the top 10 vulnerable countries. We get our lifeline of water, energy, and food from Indus River. And if you have glacial meltings because of the global warming, you will have floods, followed by droughts and complete change in the way the farming is done. We are already a water-stressed economy, and if we don't really take care, both through mitigation and adaptation, we are going to be in serious difficulty. And finally, economists used to consider capital as the major determinant of economic growth. That is completely now a passé. It's the investment in human capital which is going to be responsible for distinction between the economies and the societies which are going to go ahead and those which are going to be left behind. And our record in human capital formation, unfortunately, is not that great. That even after 70 years, our adult literacy rate is below 60%, and only 25% of our females are participating in the labor force. No other country in the world will ever progress if we continue on this treadmill, which we have been doing for the past. So this is a wake-up call that you do not just consider your domestic and internal circumstances and problems, but try to contextualize this in the larger picture, because after all, Pakistan is a small dot among the 186 countries. We cannot control the world, and we will be affected by the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ishrat Husain, for the words of wisdom. I would like to welcome Dr. Arfa Sayeda Zehra. Dr. Arfa Sayeda Zehra is a professor of history with over 50 years of teaching and research experience in various institutes of Pakistan. Her research include historical analysis, critique, human rights, gender literature, and social issues. A warm welcome to Dr. Arfa Sayeda Zehra.
معزز و موقر خواتین و حضرات، جناب امینہ سید، جناب آصف فروخی صاحب، جناب ڈاکٹر عشرت حسین صاحب، جناب خالد محمود صاحب اور جناب اسٹیفن ونکلر صاحب، اور میرا غائبانہ سلام گورنر صاحب کو. Mr. Winkler, I owe you an apology, and I should begin with that. While I'll be speaking in Urdu, I don't wish to appear disrespectful or rude to you, but it's a matter of descent of whole life. It's a matter of identity for myself. And it is not possible for me that I should give it up, just that you could understand. But I'm sure you know Urdu that well, and it will reach you. Ameena Sayyid Sahiba and Asif Farrukhi, they have been very kind to me for the past 9 years. I have been a participant in their founded, organized लिटरेचर फेस्टिवल. 10वें बरस उन्होंने जगह भी बदल ली, नाम भी बदल लिया. आप देखिए कि 10वां नंबर बहुत ज़बरदस्त होता है. मैं पुलिस थाने के हिसाब से नहीं कह रही हूँ, मैं उसको इस हिसाब से कह रही हूँ, एक अकेले में जब 0 लगता है तो 10 की हिम्मत हो जाती है. जनाब खालिद महमूद साहब यहाँ तशरीफ़ रखते हैं, जो अदब नवाज़ी और शेर व शायरी की बात करते, तो उन्होंने उर्दू के एक मिसरे को झुटला दिया. उर्दू का मिसरा ये था कि वो जो बेचते थे दवाए दिल, वो दुकान अपनी बढ़ा गए, लेकिन आपके यहाँ होने से महसूस होता है कि वो दुकान तो चल के दर्द दिल तक पहुँच जाती है. मैं ममनून हूँ आपकी इसके लिए. ये जब अंग्रेज़ी में की नोट कहते हैं तो बहुत अजीज़ व मोहतरम लगने लगता है. अगर मैं कहूँ उर्दू में कलीदी मकाला कुंजी की तकरीर, तो लोग पूछेंगे ताला कहाँ लगाएं. और मैं बेहद इत्मीनान से कहना चाहती हूँ कि वो ताला कुफ़्ल अबजद है जो हमारी फ़िक्र पर लगा है. और ये सारी कोशिशें इस बात की हैं कि उस फ़िक्र का दरीचा खोल दिया जाए. और देखिए, खुलने में दिक्कत भी होती है, मुश्किल भी होती है, उन्स भी होता है, गैर उन्स भी होता है, लेकिन हमेशा एक नई राह बहुत सौ के लिए बहुत लाजमी और ज़रूरी होती है. अमीना सैयद और आसिफ फ़र्रुखी की तारीफ़ किस तरह से की जाए कि उन्होंने जब पहले अदब के जश्न का इरादा किया तो वो जश्न पूरे मुल्क में फैला, वहाँ तक गया जहाँ कभी हम सोच नहीं सकते थे. मेरे सामने खातून बेला जमील बैठी हैं, उन्होंने कहा कि बच्चों के अदब का भी एक जश्न होगा. और आज आप देख रहे हैं ये बूढ़ों के अदब का जश्न है. तो ये उम्र की मंजिलों को तय करना इसलिए बहुत ज़रूरी है कि माजी, हाल और मुस्तक़बिल को कभी अलग न किया जा सके. और मैं उर्दू इसलिए भी बोलती हूँ कि माजी से शर्मिंदा नहीं हूँ, हाल से परेशान नहीं हूँ, और मुस्तक़बिल पर यकीन बहुत है. आपने सुना होगा कि हम इस मुल्क में बहुत ज़्यादा तालीम याफ्ता लोग हैं. तालीम बहुत. इशरत हुसैन साहब ने जो आपको शरफ़-फ़ीसद बताई है वो ख़ानदगी की थी. मैं तालीम की बात कर रही हूँ. कागज़ का एक टुकड़ा मिलता है تو ہم راجہ اندر کے دربار میں ناچنے لگتے ہیں، لیکن اس کاغذ کے ٹکڑے کے پیچھے کتنی ذمہ داری ہے وہ ہماری آنکھ جھکائے رکھتی ہے۔ میں آج دو لفظوں کی بات آپ سے کرنا چاہتی ہوں۔ ایک لفظ تربیت ہے، اور اگر تربیت ہو جائے تو کچھ شگوفے کہیں پھوٹ پڑتے ہیں اور ان کو ہم تہذیب کہتے ہیں۔ ادب دراصل تعلیم سے زیادہ تربیت اور تہذیب کا حصہ ہے۔ تعلیم کا جو تصور ہمارے ہاں اس وقت ہے، اس سے مراد یہ ہوتی ہے کہ اس کے عوض میں کتنے سکے کھنکھنائے جا سکتے ہیں، یا آپ کے تنخواہ میں ایک عدد ہو تو اس کے آگے کتنے صفر اور لگ سکتے ہیں۔ اور یہ یہاں ایک اور صفر کی بات نہیں ہے، یہاں واقعی تعلیم صفر ہو جاتی ہے، اس لیے کہ وہ تربیت کی ذمہ داری نہیں اٹھاتی، وہ تہذیب کو پروان چڑھانے کی ذمہ داری نہیں اٹھاتی۔ اور یہ آج جو ہم جہاں میں اور آپ موجود ہیں، اور یہ جو ادب کا جشن برپا ہے، وہ اس بات کی دلیل ہے کہ لوگ یہاں اس لیے کھنچ کے چلے آتے ہیں کہ اس کے بعد صنعت تو کوئی نہیں ملے گی، مگر خیال پر ایک مہر لگ جائے گی کہ سرمایہ بہت ہے۔ ہم بظاہر بہت غریب لگتے ہیں اور بار بار دہراتے ہیں کہ IMF سے قرضہ لینا ہے۔ IMF کی کیا مجال ہے کہ ہمیں قرضہ دے سکے تہذیب کا؟ IMF کی کیا مجال ہے کہ وہ مجھے اور آپ کو قرضہ دے سکے تربیت کا؟ یہ تو مجھے اور آپ کو اپنے گریبان میں جھانک کے دیکھنا ہے کہ کیا مانگتے ہیں اور کس قیمت پہ مانگتے ہیں۔ ایک سوال یہ بھی اٹھتا ہے کہ ادب کا جوہر، ادب کی روح، ادب کا عطر بڑی دیدہ ریزی میں ہوتا ہے، بڑی محنت صرف کرنا پڑتی ہے، بہت جان جلانی پڑتی ہے، بہت دل دکھانا پڑتا ہے۔ جب ادیب اس سب کے ذریعے سے خود کو مٹا چکتا ہے تو پھر جو لفظ لکھتا ہے وہ ایک ایسا لفظ ہوتا ہے جو کبھی مر نہیں سکتا۔ کچھ کو اچھا لگے، کچھ کو برا لگے، اس کی کوئی شرط نہیں ہے۔ اور یہ جو انگریزی کا ایک لفظ آپ نے لکھا اور اس سے میرا جی بہت خوش ہوا، میں اپنے بہت عزیز لوگوں کو جو میرے سامنے بیٹھے ہوں، جن میں بہت سے بہت عزیز لوگ میرے سامنے بیٹھے، انہیں یہ بتا دینا چاہتی ہوں کہ مجھے انگریزی بری نہیں لگتی، بالکل بھی نہیں۔ زبان بھی بے حد اچھی ہے، ادب بھی بہت کمال کا ہے، اور آج تو وہ دنیا بھر کی زبان ہوئی، لیکن میں اس زبان کو اپنے اظہار کے لیے اس لیے قبول نہیں کرتی کہ پھر اس سے میری زبان کی توہین ہو جاتی ہے۔ آپ نے اس میں ایک لفظ استعمال کیا ہے، ڈائیورسٹی۔ آپ کو معلوم ہوگا ہر عہد کا ایک لفظ ہوتا ہے، اس عہد کا لفظ ڈائیورسٹی ہے، اور یہ ایک بڑی خوبصورت صورتحال ہے کہ جہاں چیزیں مختلف ہوں مگر ان میں اختلاف نہ ہو۔ یہ بڑی عجیب سی بات ہوگی کہ چیزیں مختلف ہیں مگر اختلاف کے لیے نہیں، ماننے کے لیے، سمجھنے کے لیے۔ اور تربیت ایک ہی کام کرتی ہے، فہم سکھاتی ہے، صرف فہم سکھاتی ہے۔ تعلیم بھی اور فہم کے بغیر تہذیب سے کوئی دوستی کا، تعلق کا ناطہ نہیں ہو پاتا۔ اور یہ جو ڈائیورسٹی ہے، میں یہ لفظ اس لیے استعمال کر رہی ہوں کہ یہ ان کے ادب فیسٹیول کا کی ورڈ ہے، کلیدی لفظ ہے، مرکزی لفظ ہے، اور اس کے گرد دنیا گھومنا بھی چاہیے ادب کی۔ دیکھیے اپنے آپ کو محدود کر کے صرف خوش ہو جانا کافی نہیں ہوتا. نہ تکبر ہمیں خوش کرتا ہے نہ تبرہ ہمیں خوش کرتا ہے، مگر ہمارے ہاں یہی دو لفظ سب سے زیادہ کام میں آتے ہیں. یا آپ تکبر کر لیجئے، اور جب آپ تکبر کریں گے تو پھر آپ کو کوئی اپنے جیسا نہیں لگے گا، تو پھر اس کے لیے لہجہ آپ کا بدل جاتا ہے. میں سمجھتی ہوں یہ کہ یہ جو بہت سارے رنگ ہیں، اس ہمہ رنگی میں ایک یگانگت ہوتی ہے، اور وہ یگانگت اس بات کی ہے کہ اس میں سے ہر رنگ ہمارا ہے، میرا نہیں ہے، ہمارا ہے. اور جب ہم میں سے ہم تک پہنچتے ہیں، جو ہم ابھی تک نہیں پہنچ پائے، مجھے افسوس سے کہنا پڑتا، یہ ہم ہونا بہت مشکل ہے. وہ اس لیے مشکل ہے کہ آپ خوشی کی خاطر ساری تلخی کو، زہر ناکی کو شربت سمجھ کے پی جاتے ہیں، اور پھر جو کچھ کہتے ہیں ادب کے حوالے سے وہ برسوں کے لیے ایک سرمایہ ہو کے رہتا ہے. اور جو تحریر ادب کے ذریعے مجھ تک اور آپ تک پہنچتی ہے، وہ قانون کا فیصلہ نہیں ہوتی، کیونکہ اب قانون کے فیصلے ضرورتیں پوری کرنے کے لیے ہوتے ہیں، آرزو پوری کرنے کے لیے نہیں. میرے نزدیک انصاف وہ ہے جو میری آرزو سے انصاف کر چکے، جو میری تمنا سے انصاف کر سکے. اس کے لیے چندہ جمع نہیں ہو سکتا. اگر چندہ جمع ہوگا تو وہ ادب کی شکل میں ہوگا، وہ ادب پارے ہوں گے، وہ لفظ ہوں گے، وہ مصرے ہوں گے، وہ جملے ہوں گے جو دل کی بنیاد میں آئیں گے اور تازہ خیال آگے بڑھے گا. دراصل جب یہ صورتحال ہو جاتی ہے تو پھر دل اور دماغ دونوں کے دریچے کھلتے ہیں. میں یہ بات کہتے نہیں تھکتی، اتنی دفعہ دہرا چکی ہوں کہ شاید آپ بھی اس سے عاجز آ گئے ہوں گے، کہ زندگی اپنی بنیاد کے لیے امکان کی تلاش کرتی ہے. زندگی نہ قانون کے فیصلے پر، نہ فتوے پر، نہ خطبے پر بالکل اپنی بنیاد نہیں رکھتی، وہ امکان کو تلاش کرتی ہے. اور ادب کو دیکھ لیجئے کہ وہ اس امکان کی طرف بڑھ کے خود جاتا ہے، جس طرح چاہے لکھ دے، مگر ہمیں یہ معلوم ہوتا ہے کہ یہاں وہ امکان موجود ہے جس پہ اگر ہم عمل کر پائے تو زندگی شاید ہمارے قدم چوم لے گی. مگر ہم نے دراصل معاملہ بالکل متضاد کر دیا ہے. ہم زندگی کے لیے ہر کسی کے قدم چومتے پھرتے، اور جب کوئی سر جھک جاتا ہے تو پھر اس کا کچھ نہیں رہتا. سر تو صرف اس لیے ہوتا ہے کہ اٹھا کے جئیں، کہ اٹھا کے جئیں. اس میں مشکل بھی ہوگی، اس میں تلخی بھی ہوگی، اس میں اختلاف بھی ہوگا، لیکن ہماری ہمہ رنگی اور ہمارے رنگ ہمیں ان کے سامنے کبھی پسپا نہیں ہونے دیں گے. میں آپ سے ادب اور ادب کے امکان کے تعلق کی بات کر رہی ہوں. میں یہاں یہ بات واضح کر دینا چاہتی ہوں کہ ادب نسخہ نہیں لکھتا. کوئی غزل، کوئی نظم، کوئی کہانی، کوئی ناول، تاریخ، فلسفہ، کچھ بھی اٹھا کے دیکھ لیجئے، اس میں روزانہ صبح شام 3 خوراکوں کی ترکیب نہیں لکھی ہوگی. ادب بہت مختلف نسخہ لکھتا ہے. ادب جو نسخہ لکھتا ہے وہ بہت کم طبیعتوں کو راس آتا ہے اور زیادہ کو راس نہیں آتا، اور اکثر اقتدار کو بالکل راس نہیں آتا. اور یہی ادب کی کامیابی ہے. یہی ادب کی کامیابی ہے کہ وہ سب کو لا کے ایک جگہ پر کھڑا کر دیتا ہے. ادب سے سیاست کی مدت کا جوہر نہیں ہے پیدا ہوتا. ادب سے دولت کی کیمیا گری کی تمنا نہیں ہوتی. ادب عجب چیز ہے، مفلوق الحال کو بہت قریب کر دیتا ہے مالا مال ہونے سے، چاہے بیت المال تک اس کی پہنچ ہو یا نہ ہو. یہ ایک الگ معاملہ ہے. ادب دراصل مجھے اچھا اس لیے لگتا ہے کہ اس میں بڑی قوت ہے کہ وہ زندگی کی ہولناکی کو قبول کرتا ہے، اس سے ڈرتا نہیں، اس سے ڈرتا نہیں، اور غالب ہو تو یہاں تک پہنچ جاتا ہے کہ ابن مریم ہوا کرے کوئی، میرے دکھ کی دوا کرے کوئی. کل سیف آپ کو غالب کی باتیں سنائیں گے، اس لیے میں یہیں پر رک جاتی ہوں. میں اس ادب کے جشن کو خیال اور لفظ کا جشن سمجھتی ہوں. جو خیال ہو اس کی مناسبت سے اگر لفظ مل سکیں تو کیا اچھی بات ہے، اور جس قدر ہوں اتنے ہی کم ہیں. میں ادب کے حوالے سے اور ادب کی ذمہ داری جس تہذیب کو دے رہی ہوں وہ دراصل عادت اور برتاؤ کی تہذیب نہیں ہے. تشریف رکھیے. اب بڑی مدت ہوئی آپ کا دیدار نہیں ہوا، بڑی نوازش کہ آپ نے زحمت کی. نہیں، آداب معاشرت ادب نہیں ہے. ادب دراصل آداب فکر سکھاتا ہے، اور جب فکر کے آداب آ جاتے تو احساس اس کے اندر ڈھل جاتا ہے. اور جب فکر اور احساس ایک جگہ کھڑے ہو کے ڈھلتے ہیں تو اسے ہم تہذیب کہنے لگتے ہیں، جس سے آج کل ہم کچھ خائف ہیں. ہم سمجھتے ہیں نئے زمانے میں تہذیب نہیں ہوتی، صرف طور طریقے ہو سکتے ہیں. اگر ادب فکر اور احساس کا ترجمان نہیں ہوگا تو وہ ادب میری اور آپ کی جو بنیادی قدریں ہیں ان کو توانائی بھی نہیں دے سکے گا. اور ایسا ادب ہمیں بھٹکا تو سکے گا، منزل کی نشاندہی نہیں کر پائے گا. ایک اچھا خیال اور ایک اچھی زبان اور ایک اچھا احساس منفی صورتحال سے بھی سامنے آ جاتے ہیں. عرب بہلاتا بھی نہیں، ادب بہکاتا بھی نہیں. وہ ہمیں صرف آمادہ کرنا چاہتا ہے، کچھ کچوکے لگاتا ہے، مگر وہ بھی تہذیب سے. سلیقہ شرط ہے ادب کے لیے، اور جہاں سلیقہ نہیں وہاں تہذیب کی حرمت کا معاملہ بہت دور کی بات ہو جاتا ہے. تہذیب میرے خیال میں دو چیزوں کی تمنا کا نام ہے، اور یہ بات کہہ کے میں آپ سے اجازت چاہوں گی. ایک تو خیال کا حسن اور زبان کا جادو. جو اپنے لفظ نہیں چن سکتے اور جو اپنے لفظ اختیار کرنے کے لیے صبر نہیں کر سکتے، وہ ہمارے ہی جیسے معاشرے ہوتے ہیں جن میں برداشت نہیں ہوتی. لفظ سب سے پہلے برداشت سکھاتا ہے، دوسرے کی بات سننے کا حوصلہ ہونا چاہیے. ہم تو یہ کہتے ہیں کہ جو کچھ ہم کہہ رہے ہیں وہی حرف آخر ہے، اور اس کے بعد کہنے کی کچھ گنجائش نہیں. زندگی اصل معنوں میں سوچنے کا جشن مناتی ہے، اور ادب اس جشن کو جاری رکھتا ہے. امینا اور آصف، آپ دونوں کا بے حد شکریہ. آپ میری 16 برس کی عمر میں مجھے جشن منانے کا موقع دیتے ہیں، اور شکریہ.
بہت شکریہ عارفہ سیدہ صاحبہ. آپ کی گفتگو اردو میں سب کا دل جیت لیا ہے آپ کے وٹ اور ہیومر سے. تھینک یو سو مچ. I would like to welcome Vali Nasr. Vali Nasr needs no introduction, and it's an honor and privilege to have him with us today. He is a well-known academic and author specializing in the Middle East and the Islamic world. He is currently Dean of the Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies in Washington, D.C., and a Senior Fellow in the Foreign Policy at the Brookings Institution. A warm welcome to Vali Nasr.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much to Adab Literary Festival for inviting me to this great event, and it's wonderful to be back in Karachi. When we chose the title of my talk, which is Implications of U.S. Foreign Policy for South Asia, we hadn't planned that there would be new developments happening. But I guess it's timely to have this conversation. And when I travel anywhere in the world these days, in my capacity as a dean, there's always questions about what is the implication of U.S. foreign policy. There is no doubt that there has been tremendous change in the way in which U.S. foreign policy has unfolded in the past 2 years. President Trump has brought enormous amount of change, shock and awe, if you would, to the conduct of statecraft. And the key question is, how much is there continuity, how much is there change, and how much of the change that he is trying to bring about will actually last? And what are sort of the fundamentals in U.S. Islamic world relations and U.S. Middle East and South Asia relations that are likely to continue going forward? There is no doubt that when we talk about the U.S.'s approach to the Muslim world, by and large, it's narrowed down to South Asia and the Middle East. And particularly after 9/11, essentially one rubric has governed this relationship by and large, which is the concern with Islamic radicalism and the threat of terrorism. That has guided policy in large ways. I don't mean necessarily in every single detail, but in large ways towards both the Middle East and South Asia. So whether wars in Iraq, in Syria, in Yemen, or in Afghanistan have had this element of concern with terrorism. And generally, the structure of U.S. relations with countries in the region is been very much concerned with the direction that Islamic radicalism and terrorism can take. And so that's not different right now. I would say the major difference is that we have a very different kind of president in the United States. Aside from his style, his use of language, his manner of conducting statecraft, there are certain fundamental issues that are important to note. And the most important is that he is essentially a maverick president. In other words, he has his own singular view of what world affairs should be, what conduct of relations with the world ought to be. He has certain fundamental views. For instance, he thinks trade is a bad thing. There's no point to it that economic relations between countries are zero-sum. One wins, one loses. It's a deal. There's no sort of a greater good that comes from the give and take of goods. He doesn't believe in globalization. He believes in America first, which, you know, if it's brought down to its essence, it means that America or any country out there is essentially there to maximize the advantage, but not necessarily to build a global community. He doesn't believe in alliances or any permanent alliances. For instance, he's tried to weaken some of America's oldest alliances with Europe or with Japan and Korea, fundamentally believing that these are costly relationships that don't pay any dividend to the United States. And generally speaking, he has a transactional view of foreign policy. In other words, what do you have for me? What do you want for what I need you to do? And he doesn't believe that, you know, relations between countries goes any further than that. Now, this style has had a big impact on the way in which countries think about not just the United States, but think about the global order, and particularly regional order, and ultimately the way in which relations are conducted. Because, ultimately, all countries conduct their foreign policies based on certain assumptions of some things that are going to be there. And if those things are not there, then countries will calculate and act very differently. Now, when it comes to Middle East and South Asia, generally speaking, there's a lot of differences between President Trump and his predecessors, President Obama, Clinton, Bush, the establishment of the Republican Party and Democratic Party, the foreign policy bureaucracy or economic bureaucracy. But when it comes to Middle East and South Asia, there are certain continuities there as well. There are certain continuities with the Obama administration, which I think reflect what is the general mood of the American public and the general mood, public opinion about why the United States is pursuing certain policies in this region and in the Middle East. And generally that mood among the American public is that the degree of engagement, military, political, and economic, that the United States has had in South Asia and the Middle East has been too much, and at any rate does not pay dividend, and that it's not serving the US interests. And in fact, there's a very broader question as to whether or not the United States actually has an interest in Middle East or South Asia, or actually has the interests that for a long time were just seen as givens. That, we need oil, therefore we're in the Middle East. In fact, the United States is now the world's most important oil producer. It's now replaced Saudi Arabia as the swing producer. In fact, the greatest threat to Saudi Arabia is American oil. In the next 20 years, the United States will be the single largest exporter of oil. So the US definitely doesn't need Middle East oil. The US can outproduce Saudi Arabia and OPEC, and whether the prices go up or the prices come down. In fact, it's an economic threat to OPEC. So, but still in the mindset of many Americans, there was this assumption that there's some concrete reason why we have to pay more attention to the Middle East than to Africa or to Southeast Asia. President Obama was the first to actually challenge this notion. He was of the view that the United States was overspending in the Middle East and was not getting results, that it was spending trillions of dollars on wars and on democracy building, and it hadn't got anywhere. And I think he fundamentally believed it would never get anywhere. He actually was not convinced that the Middle East was ready for democracy, even after the Arab Spring, and that it was a fool's errand for the United States to invest in the Middle East, and I think by similar implication, invest in South Asia, or at least let's say Southwest Asia, that's Afghanistan and Pakistan and Central Asia. The term nation building at home, which you can sort of see reflections of America first in that term, was actually coined by President Obama. In other words, instead of spending money abroad, you first spend it on your own economy at home. It was President Obama who believed in less global leadership. There was a term that was used during his administration of leading from behind, which means that let others do more of the work, that the US does not need to always be at the forefront of doing things. That doesn't mean that President Obama didn't believe in trade or in alliances or in the kind of long-run relationships, but he generally believed that the United States should do a lot less in the Middle East and South Asia, and the best thing that it can do is actually to start to withdraw from the region, which meant first, don't get involved in anything new. So if Arab Spring happened, don't roll up your sleeves and try to put a lot of money into it or get involved in building new democracies. You provide support, mostly moral support, some modicum of support, that's it. If Syria or Libya is collapsing into massive war, don't get involved, regardless of how much humanitarian disaster there is. And he, in a very disciplined way, resisted any kind of a public pressure, humanitarian pressure, moral pressure, ethical pressure in order to get involved in the war in Syria, believing that it would be a expensive, inconclusive quagmire. And then he actually started to withdraw from the Middle East in a very effective way. So the first promise he had made was to end the war in Iraq. And he saw to the end of that by actually bringing down the number of American troops in Iraq literally to zero. And that was unprecedented in American foreign policy history, because whenever the United States got involved in wars and then helped build a new order, it had always left forces behind to protect the new order. In Japan, in Germany, in Bosnia, Iraq was the first case where the US went in a war, changed the regime, created a new constitution, a new government, and then said, you know what, we're not willing to stay here and actually make sure that this works. You're on your own. And as we saw, that Iraq began to crumble after the US left. And then in Afghanistan, I think President Obama was never convinced that this war was winnable, and that the amount of military commitment that was needed in order to make a difference to Afghanistan was something that the American public would accept, or at the end would produce positive result. And I think increasingly his administration was convinced that some of the loftier goals about Afghanistan, like that it would be a democracy, that it could have a industrial economy, that its agriculture could be stood up, that you could essentially build a model country there, was unlikely to happen. And every story of corruption or Taliban attack or failures essentially reinforced this idea. So gradually, he first embraced the idea of investing enough in the military force in order to at least create circumstances that of sufficient stability that the U.S. could begin leaving Afghanistan. And this was based on the model of Iraq, where a surge had brought enough stability to have a power-sharing agreement that then became the basis for President Obama to withdraw the troops. So he agreed to put more troops in Afghanistan, but put a timetable on it. That this is a limited project. This is not an open-ended commitment. That the military has a certain amount of time to push back against the Taliban, to create space for some kind of a stable political order. And I think by the end of his presidency, he had settled for the idea of Afghanistan good enough. In other words, we weren't going to win there. There wasn't going to be a great victory there. We don't want defeat either, but maybe there's a way in which to just manage Afghanistan enough on the cheap with less number of troops and less amount of American commitment, so it won't be such a preoccupation of American foreign policy. Now, this obviously had implications for Pakistan, which I'll come back to. But just to continue that thread of thought, President Trump, particularly during the presidential campaign, was not that far off on Middle East and South Asia than President Trump, except that he was even more forceful and more blunt and more unvarnished in his attack, for instance, on the war in Iraq. And he also believed that the United States should not get involved in wars in the region, that state building, nation building was not America's business, and that the region ought to take care of its own problems. And he was not willing to commit to Syria, he was not willing to commit to Iraq, and on Afghanistan too, he was not willing to commit to continuing these wars. And as soon as he came into the office, he actually began a process of talking about gradually reducing America's footprint in the region. In fact, the first place this conversation happened was about Afghanistan. What's different with President Trump is that President Trump, at the same time as he says he wants to do less in the Middle East, he also is acting as if he wants to do more in the Middle East. He wants to actually go back to an era where the U.S. would decide the architecture, security architecture of the region. So he also had grand ideas about the region. He wanted to come out of the nuclear deal. President Obama had gone into the nuclear deal as a way of leaving the Middle East, because by reducing tensions with Iran, by taking the Iranian nuclear program off the table as a cause of war, he had in effect made it easier for the United States to say that there's nothing urgent in this region and therefore we could move on to somewhere else. President Trump, on the other hand, has been escalating tensions with Iran, has a project of changing Iran's regional behavior, says that he wants to cut Iran's hands out of the Arab world, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Yemen, and put it back in its box. That, to some, does not sound like doing less in the region, sounds like doing more in the region. And President Trump has had a view of creating a very close alliance with the Arab world, particularly Saudi Arabia and the Persian Gulf countries, as a way of managing the Middle East. And that also is counter to the notion of leaving the region. President Obama had the idea that the Arabs should defend themselves, that they should learn to get along with Iran, that ultimately the United States is not going to sit between Iran and the Persian Gulf Emirates, and they have to figure out how they coexist in the region. Not that the United States would condone any action Iran did, but it wasn't going to be doing a massive amount of containment. President Trump talks about containing Iran, talks about a very close relationship with Saudi Arabia and other Gulf countries in containing Iran. That hasn't worked really, largely because I think the Saudi Arabia of President Trump's imagination is not real. President Trump sort of saw Saudi Arabia as a genuine regional superpower, as a country that is capable of doing what Egypt once used to do, of sort of managing regional affairs, having the military muscle to deal with Iran. And very soon it's become clear that's not the case. First of all, Saudi Arabia and other Arab countries have completely washed their hands of Syria. I mean, if you look today, the fate of Syria is being decided by everybody other than Arab countries. The countries that matter in Syria are Iran, Russia, Turkey, Israel, and the United States. The Arab countries are not there, and they don't want to be involved. They claim that they are busy in Yemen, but they would greatly appreciate it if the United States would take care of Syria for them, and would kick Iran out of Syria, but that they were not willing to do that. So, in Syria, they didn't show up. In Iraq, the elections happened. You ended up with a government that is more leaning towards Iran. The Arab countries have no influence there. And then, rather than creating a united bloc in support of the policy of containing Iran by picking a fight with Qatar, in effect, Saudi Arabia and its allies, UAE and Bahrain, have broken up the Gulf Cooperation Council. It really doesn't exist anymore. In reality, it's divided among itself, and at least Qatar and Oman look to Iran now a lot more favorably than they may look to their own neighbors. And in reality, the job of even containing Iran in the Persian Gulf is not there. And then the Khashoggi affair has severely damaged Saudi Arabia's international standing, and in particular has damaged its standing in the United States to an extent that the administration has to spend more energy defending why it's friends with Saudi Arabia than to use Saudi Arabia to actually achieve its regional objectives. So I think after this sort of contradictory foray into the Middle East, things have clarified a bit better for President Trump, which is that he now says, we're out of Syria completely. And if Turkey is volunteering to take care of ISIS, all power to them. That actually suits us very well. And that, the Yemen war now has to finish, and that we're not willing to do any more than what we're doing there. So despite the heightened rhetoric, I think President Trump has fallen back to where President Obama was, which is the United States is not going to sign up to major involvement in the region. It's going to talk the talk about containing Iran, about regional behavior, but it's not going to put any muscle on the ground to actually kick Iran out of Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. And I personally don't think that there's going to be a war between Iran and the United States unless there is an unforeseen development, like one side does something provocative that escalates. But as a matter of planning, I just don't see it. It goes against the grain of where this administration is going. Now, to the eastern side of this issue, to Afghanistan and Pakistan, I would say that since 9/11, US's view of Afghanistan and its relationship with Afghanistan has been increasingly narrowed down to the issue of Afghanistan. Yes, there are other sets of relationships, but it's very difficult to detect them. That what else is that is important enough for at the highest level for the leaders of the two countries talk about? There's hardly any trade. There's the level of people-to-people relations, level of other sort of cooperative engagement on varieties of other global issues, regional issues are all missing. This has become, over the past 20 years, largely a security relationship. Maybe it suited security establishments on both sides because it's a very sort of a parsimonious, easy to manage relationship. And for Pakistan, it was always a double-edged sword. It both brought a lot of bounty to Pakistan, a lot of money that was targeted for counterterrorism and cooperation in Afghanistan, but it also brought a lot of pressure. During the Bush administration was the sort of high point of the United States viewing Pakistan and the Musharraf government as an ally cooperating on the war in Afghanistan. That changed during the Obama administration. There was much more of a jaded view of Pakistan, that the war in Afghanistan cannot be won either because Pakistan's not doing enough or that it is actually proactively helping the Taliban, that its agenda in Afghanistan is not in line with that of the United States. Now, I'm not saying that this is the correct view. I'm saying this is the view that became dominant. So then the question became that if Pakistan's policy, if Pakistan's strategy is not aligned, can we change it? And I think the Obama administration used varieties of different strategies to see, can it change Pakistan's position in Afghanistan? I think the positive side of this effort was that it was the first time that Americans actually seriously considered that Pakistan has different objectives in Afghanistan than the American one. I think in the Bush administration, there was a naivete of thinking that if we care about terrorism, if we like Karzai, if we want this, if we want that, everybody else, of course, obviously wants the same thing. And I think President Musharraf was willing to feed into that naivete by basically saying we're all on the same page. Under Obama administration, there was much more of a sober view that Pakistan is a sovereign country. We may not like its policies, but it has its own view on this issue. The question is, can those views be influenced? When I worked in the State Department with Ambassador Holbrooke, his approach was that Pakistan's relationship with the U.S., Pakistan's national strategy, its strategic calculus can only be influenced if there is a trusting, close relationship with the United States. if the relationship between the two countries are transactional, exactly the way President Trump now sees the world, then nobody invests in a relationship. You only use a relationship short term and you pursue your own goals. You're not going to hit your national interest on the back of a country that you don't trust and with whom you don't have a very tight relationship. So he pushed very hard for much greater economic relationship with Pakistan, much greater humanitarian relationship with Pakistan. But there were other voices in the US as well, those who thought that pressure works better. And particularly after Ambassador Holbrooke passed away, that view took over, that perhaps gloves have to come off and you have to put a lot more pressure on Pakistan. And particularly the US military, the longer it was not able to deliver on what it thought was a quick repeat of the surge in Iraq, began to increasingly blame Pakistan for that failure. The safe havens, what they saw as vacillation, what they saw as support for Haqqani network, varieties of things. And they began to favor putting a lot more pressure on Pakistan. This eventually sort of culminated in a direct clash during the Salalah incident, where a border shooting led to the death of 24 Pakistani soldiers. And I think that became a sort of a wake-up call for both sides. I mean, neither one of them wanted to really have a repeat of that or an escalation of that, and that the cost for both sides would be high. There was a period of chill, including Pakistan closing its border to Afghanistan, US sort of downsizing its relations with Pakistan. Eventually, I think there was a formula found out for both sides to climb down from the tree. A sort of a tepid apology from the US, a acceptance from Pakistan, the border open, and I think both sides sort of agreed to manage the relationship very narrowly in a way that they both could live with it. And so you had a period of, we went from intense interest in Pakistan to a period of kind of insouciance and ignoring Pakistan. And as Afghanistan left the front pages, and that idea of Afghanistan good enough made it less of a priority for American foreign policy, it was possible to manage this relationship. Now, just as President Obama, during the campaign, promised to come out of Iraq, President Trump promised that he would end the war in Afghanistan. And when he has come in, he has been focused on this issue. Even though the last we heard was a tweet, but I think before this tweet, unlike many other issues, there's been a lot of debate and conversation about Afghanistan. I know he's impatient about why this war has dragged on. Why is it the longest war in American history? I think he would love to be able to say during the presidential campaign next year that he has ended the longest war in American history. Especially he's achieved something Obama couldn't, which is to end this war. So he began to push the Pentagon immediately about, well, why hasn't this war ended? And what do you need to finish the war? And, military men always have the same answer to this question. We need more. And his answer was no. You get half of what you have currently, and you need to deliver twice as much as what you had promised, which was obviously a recipe for failure. And what we've seen in the past 2 years is that the Taliban have taken over larger parts of Afghanistan. ISIS has found a basis there, and the situation is actually more volatile than it was before. His instinct in responding to this increase in volatility has not been to say that, let's double down the number of troops, we need to do more. But I think as it's become evident is that he's become very serious about actually leaving Afghanistan. And by appointing a special envoy, Ambassador Khalilzad, and especially the choice of Khalilzad reflected the seriousness of the White House about leaving. Now I have to say the president is alone in this view.
or at least in the way in which this is going forward. We've seen Pentagon, the Congress, the Senate even have censured him, and some of his closest allies have censured him. But I think he's of the view that this war, and I think this is instinctive to him, and he's not incorrect on this, that this war is not winnable. It's not winnable, at least on numbers, money, soldiers, deaths, investment that would be tolerable to the American public. And the idea of being in Afghanistan for another 20, 30 years is also silly. And in fact, it's evident that even maintaining the current sort of status quo may not be tenable either. You might need a lot more investment just to keep your head above the water. So if that's the case, you need to leave. If you need to leave, you need to have an agreement to leave by. You need to have at least a piece of paper with the Taliban that arrives at some kind of a ceasefire or end of war or armistice, if not a peace treaty settlement, that would provide you the basis to reduce your troops and ultimately leave Afghanistan. So that's what's been unfolding. And I think this is an idea, the idea of reconciliation, as it was called during the Obama administration, is not new. Ambassador Holbrooke started this. I think the difference then is that the administration was not committed to this. It was not willing to put real effort into it. I think President Obama was more attuned to what the domestic political impact to the idea of talking to the terrorists would be, quote unquote, and was worried that this would be seen as he being weak on national security. I think President Trump doesn't care about these things. He doesn't care. He doesn't think that a peace treaty with the Taliban would impact his base. In fact, he's fairly confident that he can turn it into the most beautiful treaty ever written. He's very confident in being able to sell it. So what he wants is actually the agreement. And the agreement ultimately is going to go to sort of the basics of why was the United States in Afghanistan in the first place. So it wasn't there for humanitarian reasons. It wasn't there to build a democracy. It wasn't there to build a capitalist economy. It wasn't there to build a nation, right? It was there to get rid of Al-Qaeda and to make sure that Afghanistan is not a base for terrorism. So I think the fundamental element of a deal is going to be around the core issue that the United States really worries about. And I think there are reasons to think that at least in the initial phase, there is seriousness and progress. I mean, one of the things that President Trump has brought about, although not intentionally, is that he has basically killed terrorism as a political obsession. Americans don't see it as their greatest priority. The biggest existential threat to them, in their view, could be President Trump himself, China, Russia, but it's not. They're not really obsessed with ISIS or an attack on America the way they were before. And if nothing comes out of Afghanistan to change their minds, they're not going to be obsessing about the Taliban too much, at least not the average American outside of the elite establishment. So that gives them a lot of political room to maneuver. Secondly, he is willing and capable to stand up to the foreign policy establishment and to Congress. And he is willing to put pressure on also some other regional actors to also get involved and engaged and work. Now, evidence early on is that Pakistan has also adopted a very different tack with this. In other words, it's much more positively engaged. It has released Mullah Baradar from custody. It has ferried him to negotiations in Doha. And the question is, why did Pakistan change its position? There might be varieties of reasons, including the fact that it may really believe that there is that this particular American president, with his particular ideas and the fact that he's willing to take on his own administration, may provide a unique opportunity to move past what is traditional American foreign policy, muscle memory, if you want to call it, the way in which it always acts. So, there is an opportunity to help the United States get out. If it's serious about getting out, if it wants, what it wants is a deal, if you're looking at what happened in Syria, if you're looking at what he's doing with Korea, with Europe, if you really see him as an opportunity, you may as well act on it. Now, I think this is an interesting moment for Pakistan. I mean, I'm not saying this deal is going to get done. It has to go through it has many conditionalities attached to it, including how quickly will it be signed, whether the Taliban play ball, what happens between the Afghans themselves, and whether Trump gets elected or not, and how far the deal would be if in case there is another president, and whether that president decides that this is not a good deal and scuttles it. So it's not a done deal. But if we were to assume that this moves forward, then it would be a period in which, during the deal making, Pakistan and the US are genuinely on the same side and following the same script in a meaningful way. If not since 2001, definitely since 2009, since when Obama came to power. So that opens certain possibilities. And then the other question is that what if the United States leaves Afghanistan? What if Afghanistan is no longer a principal issue for the US? Then what else is there between Pakistan and the US, right? What else will sustain a relationship? So, the answer to that, has to come from Americans, but it also has to come from Pakistanis themselves. Is it going to be trade? Is it some other strategic issue? Is it going to be a sort of set of regional initiatives? Is it going to be around a set of issues like climate, water, sets of things that also Europe or the US has relations with other countries? But it's an opportunity to go past this, 2 decades of Pakistan being narrowly defined in terms of security concerns and in terms of Afghanistan. And I think that's the more important challenge to deal with. Finally, the world has changed in important ways. In other words, when this story started, you could think of this region and say, other than India, it was really US and Pakistan alone, and everything else was fairly stable and static. But there are other big players in this arena: Russia and also China. China, of course, is familiar to Pakistanis. CPEC is probably the most forward station for the One Belt, One Road idea of President Xi Jinping. But China and the United States are also going through a change of relationship. And that does pose both opportunities and challenges to Pakistan. The entrance of Russia into Afghanistan, into Middle East, will also be an important factor. It's no longer going to be just between Pakistan and the United States. It's going to be how Pakistan navigates or takes advantage of what might be a much greater power relationship in this region. And even the relations with India will ultimately has to be put in the context of much broader set of bigger players that are in this region. So, all said, it is a period of change. I think the implications of Trump's foreign policy for Pakistan and for this region could be actually quite serious, quite important. They might be irreversible. I would say that there are a lot of challenges in it, depending on what happens in Afghanistan and what that means for Pakistan. But also there are certain opportunities for Pakistan. And it's a good time for it to sort of think about how does it want to move forward with the United States after Afghanistan. Thank you very much.
Thank you to Dean Seyyed Vali Nasr for the very enlightening speech on the political scenario. Now it is the very exciting time for the other festival, the announcement of the Getz Pharma Prize. I would like to invite the jury members, Hoori Noorani, Omar Shahid Hamid, and Nadya Chishty Mujahid, to please come and announce the winner. So if you are here, could you please join us on stage? Hoori Noorani, Omar Shahid Hamid, Nadya Chishty Mujahid. And I would like to also invite Mr. Khalid Mahmood, who has supported the prize, to give it to the winner.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Honored guests, Dr. Ishrat Husain, Dr. Vali Nasr, Dr. Winkler, Dr. Arfa Sayeda, and of course the organizers, Ameena and Asif Farrukhi Sahab, and of course Khalid Mahmood Sahab, the chairman of Getz Pharma, and my two jury members who I have to confess I'm meeting for the first time. When I was invited to be a part of this jury, I had very romantic notions of having long discussions over endless cups of coffee with my fellow jury members, discussing the pros and cons of these various books. But these two disabused me of those notions, and we had a schedule, very tight schedule, in which we were sort of going through books in a day or a day and a half. So thank you to the two of them for getting me through this baptism of fire. The Getz Pharma Award, as Khalid Saab has commented on slightly earlier, has very quickly established itself as one of the most prestigious awards, not only in Pakistan, in the Pakistani context, but also regionally. And it has become a huge source of encouragement to writers. I can personally testify as a former winner of this, what a boon it is to have Getz Pharma sponsor this award, and it's really sort of encouraging for all young writers. And the award has grown. I mean, we had this year 18 books that we looked at, and again, that is an indicator of the growing strength of this award. And the award is, as you would know, for English fiction written by a Pakistani or a writer of Pakistani origin. And these 18 books that we started with were very diverse. I think it's safe to say that it was perhaps the most diverse collection of books that we have had, that any jury has had up till now for the Getz Pharma Award. And from political thrillers to dystopian fiction to magical realism, it was really eye-opening for me to see, and for my other fellow jurors as well, to see the increasing variety that Pakistani writers writing in English are bringing in their books. We whittled down the 18 books to an initial long list of 9, which was announced earlier. And from that, from a further rigorous process, we got it down to 4 books. And I think the 4 books that we chose as to shortlist, again, reflect this variety and diversity, because there are 4 books by 4 authors who are, in their writing styles and their personalities and the way they approach literature, very, very different. The first was Muhammad Hanif, for his book Red Birds, and Hanif, again, someone known for the strength of his wit and his satire. Kamila Shamsie, the author of Home Fire, an author who, certainly not in terms of age, but in terms of her experience, is considered by the rest of us as our senior, the sort of godfather or godmother, I should say, of Pakistani writers, and someone really who, if you read her book, you can very quickly see that she's someone who is at the absolute apex of her powers as a writer. Bina Shah, again, an extremely experienced writer and someone who had the boldness and vision to transition in her book, in her new book, to dystopian fiction, something that she'd not looked at before and something really that's not been looked at before by Pakistani writers. So again, a very, very bold sort of presentation by her. And finally, Zehra Saeed, a debutant, but a debutant who made a very powerful and impactful debut with his book, Pure Land. And as jury members every year say, that it was a very tough decision for us to make. All of the books had their merits. But the one thing that I think we will all agree on, that we kept coming back to as we discussed these books back and forth over various email exchanges, was that one book stood out because we were all sort of unanimous about our view of that book and about the strength of the author. And it really, for us, was the outstanding book out of this selection. And that book is the winner, which would one of you like to announce it, or Noorani?
So the Getz Pharma Prize for Best Fiction in English goes to Kamila Shamsie for Home Fire. I think Muniza was here. If she could. Oh,
Saman.
Okay. Saman.
Thank you, Saman, for coming in and taking the prize for. A big round of applause, please. His sister is here. Would you like to say some words, Saman?
Well, she was really sorry she couldn't be here because of prior commitments, but wanted to say thank you to the judges for giving her this award and for the wonderful shortlist she was on. Thank you.
Thank you for the prize, Mr. Khalid Mahmood, and thank you to all the keynote speakers today. We are going to quickly move to the next, to our performance, and then everybody is welcome to move around the other festival and enjoy whichever discussion, poetry or prose session that they want to go to. So the performance is being done by the Sumaira group, and it is on folk music, which is Abda Parveen's very popular Sindhi song, Mor Tho Tile Rana. So just give us a few moments to get the dancers in place. Thank you. Hello.
इनका म्यूजिक देखिए पॉमी फिर से अनाउंस
Hello.
Don't go in front.
We are going to announce the peacock dance. As you all know, that the logo for the Adab festival is the beautiful peacock, and this dance is inspired by the logo of the Adab festival. It is being performed by the Sumaira Ali group, and it is sponsored by the Habib Metro. We are very grateful to Habib Metro for sponsoring this dance. And it is on the popular Sindhi folk music of Abda Parveen, Mor Tho Tile Rana. If everybody please takes their seat, the performance can begin. And then you can move around the other festival to your favorite spot where authors and discussions are taking place. If everybody please takes their seat, the performers can start. From 6:15 to Sumaira Ali Group. A big round of applause for the performers, please. Please, if everybody sits down, everybody can enjoy the performance. Thank you to the Sumaira group for a wonderful, heartwarming performance. A big round of applause, please. There are three events going on between 6:15 and 7:40.